Welcome to this video about Care Act duties on carers assessments. Please note we have other videos about this topic on the Sky website, alongside other resources and a handout with key messages and reflective questions. My name is Jackie and with me today is Kevin Minya. Welcome, Kevin.
Hi, Jackie.
In previous videos, we've talked about how the Care Act gives unpaid carers the right to receive support from their local authority if they have eligible needs, and how unpaid carers can get this support through a carer's assessment. As a social care practitioner, I need to keep carers' physical, mental and emotional well-being at the heart of the assessment. Also, I need to ensure that our conversations are led by the carer, using open-ended questions and focusing upon their strengths. From a carer's perspective, Kevin, I wonder how important it is to you for the assessment to be carried out in this way.
Well, completely. It's very important. I think one of the things that people need to realise is that a lot of the time carers don't know what they need. They don't even know what they like anymore. They've been sort of providing for so long that they don't know what they need. They probably don't even know what their hobbies used to be, or they probably don't know what it is they like to do on a Saturday night anymore. And so I think it's really about helping them to actually get in touch with those things that they did. So, conversational trustworthiness, being trusting, that sort of thing. So I think that's where it starts. And for some that means a face-to-face. Some may be able to get that on the telephone, but I think really in order to appreciate what a person's going through is ideally you would be in that environment. But equally, that may mean that you end up doing the assessment in front of the person that they're caring for, and that sometimes works well. I've known carers who have been really grateful for that because the person they care for has actually said, no, they need some help. Make sure they get some help. Whereas other times it may be, I don't have a carer or something like that if it's done that. So it's really important to make sure that the environment, it works for everybody. And it should really ideally be done separately if that's possible. But as I've said, there is some advantages sometimes because carers often say, I'm fine. I don't need anything. I'm okay. Equally, on the other side of that, you may have found that the carers said, yeah, they'll do this, or sorry, the person who's cared for will say, they'll do this, they'll do that, and nobody's actually asked the person if they're willing to do that, and they may not be able to say no in front of the person. So, not only is it the care assessment that needs to be done separately to some date, you do also need to verify that what's been done with the needs assessment of the person has also been properly agreed by the carer.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's a really good point. And I think, again, from a carer's perspective, it might be easier to have both assessments done at the same time because they have got they're being there as a carer. But you're absolutely right. Sometimes it might be difficult to really be open and honest and explain how it is for them in front of the person that they care for. So thank you for that. That's a really, really good point. And I also wondered in terms of carrying out the assessments, and it's particularly if it is done in someone's home, so it's face-to-face and a social care practitioner visits the person, the carer, in their home, how important it is about challenging their own assumptions so that social care practitioners go into that home with a sort of open mind and ready to sort of ask those questions and find out exactly from the carer what their situation is and what their needs are.
Well, I think I'll try and highlight some of the ways that you can come in. Any of us can come into a situation and make assumptions, and it affects what we might do there. We had one social worker who'd been off for quite a while in a caring role, and she shared a lot with us about what she'd been struggling with. Right. Well, we're all unique, and so as helpful as that may be, it's not that helpful. And basically, our experience is only one of a billion experiences that people had. So it really is about not coming in with any assumptions or thinking that you know what this person needs or they might want or what it is that they're struggling with. And so yeah, coming in with those, or even maybe they're their financial situation, their health, even hidden disabilities are a big thing that we talk about now. Carers are not don't come without their own needs and their conditions and health issues. So, there's many a person who has no money despite living in a very expensive house. There's many people that may look as if they're living very poorly, but may have a lot of money available. And so it really, and as we know, that this assessment is not about that anyway. It's first and foremost is finding out what it is that person needs to improve their quality of life, and indirectly maybe the quality of life of the person they care for. But the carer's assessment is about the carer and their needs. And I still like to keep emphasising the fact that the Care Act gives the carer the opportunity to say, no, I'm going to stop caring, but also maybe reduce the caring or even increase the caring if that's what they want to do, if the option was right, say maybe with direct payments or something like that. And I know many people who have given up work to go and to be a carer for a relative, an in-law especially, I've heard about. So it may be not what they choose, but we should make it as not as easy as possible. It should be easy, but make it as that retain as much of the quality of life as they can through that process.
Absolutely. And I think that's really interesting. Thank you for pulling that one out, Kevin, because I think it's really important to remember about boundaries, isn't it? And to challenge our own assumptions before we go in and think we know what somebody needs to help them in their role. And in fact, the whole point of the carer's assessment is that it is driven by the carer. It's about exploring ideas and options with the carer, and then they making their decisions rather than decisions being made for them. So yeah, I think that's really important. I wonder also.
Sorry,
sorry, Kevin.
It can also be about judgment. Because you're not taking very good care of this person. It's not about that, but that because maybe the person's not as clean as you would like them to be, or maybe they're not as comfortable as they might be, or maybe you've not understood. And caring 24/7 as it is for carers, basically, because they're always on your mind, is that you can never do enough. You can never do enough, and it's quite easy and quickly that's a nice clean situation can turn into a big mess very quickly, sort of thing. So it's very important not to judge. And one of the big ones that I recall being judged was that attendance allowance, which an elderly person might receive, is that they were giving money to a carer. And and I've known people think, well, that's not right. Why would they do that? Why they think? Well, that's what the money's for. Basically, they might be paying for their petrol that they can't afford, or it might be paying for their bus fare, or it might be, it could be lots of things going on. So and as I say, basically, that is what the money is for, so that they can get the interaction, they can get the company, they can get other things that they might not get otherwise if that money wasn't available. So be very careful not to judge quickly. Yes.
Yeah. Brilliant. That's a really good point. And actually taking that on that a little bit further about that kind of making a decision about somebody's how someone is caring. I wonder whether we also have assumptions around whether people are willing or able to carry on caring. People may find themselves in a caring role for perhaps somebody in their family who they don't actually have a relationship with that would help them be a carer. I just wondered if you'd had any experience or heard of any experiences about that.
Yeah. I have it's a health situation, but obviously it would have led on to a social care situation as well, where a nurse in a hospital where there was a mature man, who'd had a heart attack or had a stroke or something like that, and was in hospital. And the assumption was that this lady, the daughter, would actually take care and want to take care of her father. And this lady shared with the nurse that, well, actually, he abused me as a child, and it's not my choice. It's not my first choice. I do believe she did help, but it wasn't easy in that way, respect for her, and she could have easily said no. But there was that assumption, yeah. And there's lots of reasons why people may or may not be able to. They may not even live locally. Yeah, they may, because people do. I've known people drive 200 miles to help a relative get through an acute episode. Yeah, sort of thing, because that was the quickest way to get them support.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a really good point. Thank you, Kevin. And actually, part of that carers assessment is that duty to provide information and advice, and it might be, talking about what is available locally to that person, to that individual with needs, care needs, and perhaps supporting the carer to find other sort of circles of support rather than having to do those long journeys. Yeah.
And on that one, Jack, it's we think often of who's the main carer. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean? For many, that means there's one carer, and we'll ignore all the rest. But we really do need to make sure that whole community of carers are supported, and everyone's entitled to a carers assessment that's involved in that. And I've known many family members to say, well, no, I'm not a carer, it's dad or it's mum or whatever. And we could have a discussion about why people may be reluctant to actually register as a carer.
What do you think some of the challenges are for people? Why perhaps people are reluctant to put the hand up and say, I am a carer?
Yeah, I think actually the biggest one is that there's that sense of liability. If I say I'm a carer, then I need to be there whenever it's needed. It's a forever agreement, because many conditions, as we know, their progression is downward, which also is why we need a regular review, annually or sooner if the circumstances change. But I think it's mainly that. And what if you weren't there? What if you didn't turn up? If the police find the worst situation, would they come and say, well, where were you? Why weren't you there? What have you been doing? When was the last time you went to see them? What was the last time you contacted them? And things like this. And I think there's definitely a concern that you are actually signing up to a contract, and as an unpaid carer, as a care and family member.
I mean, that's so important for us to be aware of, because, potentially that's putting people off registering as carers and getting that support that they need. So I think in terms of when we're encouraging people to have a carers assessment to help them, we need to be aware of what those potential barriers are, so that we can reassure people from the start that that doesn't, mean that you're signed up. And I know from experience, people may be reluctant to have a carers assessment because they just hear the word assessment and think, oh gosh, does that mean you're going to assess how good I am as a carer? So I think there's really quite a lot of work we need to do before we even get into the assessment, isn't there, about setting the tone right and reassuring people about what that process is for and how it might help them and alleviate any worries that they have.
And I'm not sure if it comes into this actually, but contingency planning, we've used lots of names for that in our local area, and I'm not sure. I think that that's not there. And there's short-term contingency, like if there's a problem today, an acute episode today that we do, or there's the longer-term contingency planning of what happens when I, say, as a parent carer of a child with learning disabilities, what's going to happen when I die, or I'm no longer to actually do that care anymore. And I think they should be done in tandem. I think they should be done in tandem, that a contingency plan should be put in place. We used to joke about it. Yeah, I'm the first line of contingency, and then the next line is my brother or his family, sort of thing. We rarely consider the local authority to be part of the contingency plan, because of various reasons. But I think that might help what we said about the liability. If you know that there's a contingency plan that's in place, that you're not the end stop. You're not the end stop.
And absolutely, in a good assessment, that would be something that we should be considering. Is it, people's situations change. Are you able and willing to provide care now and in the future, and what might change and what might happen in an emergency? And as you say, what is a backup plan? What's your contingency plan? And whether or not you find yourself in that position where you're not able or willing to carry on in that carer's role. So yeah, absolutely, it's a fluid conversation, isn't it? It's not an assessment, a piece of paper that's done. It's a real live living document that's driven by the carer, and revisited as and when needed to make sure we stay up to date.
One of the examples of that is quite often the contingency plan is when the carer needs health treatment. Like for my dad, he would if he would have to go in the hospital for various treatments. My mum had very few where she didn't have any medications, actually. She didn't even have any Alzheimer's or dementia medications. But my dad is on a lot of medications. And he went in for an operation. And, you know, the amount for me, well, I'm the backup. I was the backup. I went from second carer to first carer when he was in hospital, or he went for a break, or anything like that. Whereas a lot of people don't have that. And to make those arrangements and then find that your operation is deferred, bounced for any reason, is a lot of work on the carers, and or getting respite and things like this. So in order for a carer to take care of their health is a lot more complicated than going and visit the GP once a week, or once a year, or whatever else it is. For especially as our carer gets older, or they've got their own comorbidities of their own, which many do have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, one of the duties that comes out of the Care Act is that we need to make that consideration. The assessment needs to consider the 9 areas of wellbeing for the carer. And I think exactly as you've just mentioned there, you've got health, you've got access to work, training, all those things that might have to be changed, or some needs might need to be alleviated. I just wonder how, have you had any examples of that, how useful that is for a carer to consider those 9 areas of wellbeing during the assessment?
Well, it's a matter of life and death, basically. It is a matter of life and death, because it's been proven now that if carers don't get the right support they need, they will have mental health issues, which is one thing that they will have. And if they take care of somebody with mental health issues, or maybe even cognitive impairment like my mum, it is very isolating, it's very lonely, it's very many things and that. And I even heard of a story recently where the carer actually died from suicide, took their own life, because they weren't able to say no. They weren't able to say no for whatever dynamics that was. So it is literally a matter of life and death regarding these things. And it doesn't have to be difficult. My dad used to play golf, so what did that do? It got him fresh air, it got him exercise, sometimes got company. He would play around the golf on his own. And he took up golf in his 60s, by the way. He'd never played before that. And it gave him that break. And in the early days, he would go out early in the morning, get back before my mum was really stirring and starting to get agitated because he wasn't there. And then we had sitters, care workers that would come in and do that. But it meant he could only have a couple of hours, he thought, but we could have had 2 hours back to back if he'd really wanted to, because the care worker could only stay for 2 hours. That was the arrangement. Right. So but we never even thought of that, never even considered that. To do that, and of course, who asked him anyway?
Yes.
Who asked?
All in the questions there, isn't it?
Sort of
proves how important that is. Yeah.
So there's another thing I'm going to say, is that for many people, it's also, and I don't even know if it's on the list of the 9 wellbeing, is our spiritual health. And like whether you can get to church on a Sunday anymore, whether you can meet the whatever faith it is that you're doing, whether you get to meet because with something like dementia, it, unfortunate to say it, but it's not unusual for neighbours, friends, and what have you to stop visiting, because it's either disturbing, or they don't know how to handle it, or whatever. So anyway, I won't go into that story. Many stories, as you know.
Gosh, yeah. Kevin, we could talk for hours. You've got some amazing examples of really why it's so important to get this part right, isn't it? And really be able to give carers that really good assessment, so that we can draw out exactly what their needs are, and how we can best meet those needs. But and I think some of the examples we've been talking about today, they really underpin the importance of the principles of the Care Act. Empowerment, enabling a carer to be able to have control over the decisions that are made and the options that are offered. Protection, obviously. I mean, I think your example of the nurse having that conversation with the daughter was so important. Prevention, I think absolutely. We've been talking about protecting people's mental health if they don't get that break, if they don't get opportunities to continuing their sort of leisure activities or meet socially. And of course, proportionality, partnership, and accountability. So I think all those key principles of the Care Act are so important in a carer's assessment. And I want to thank you so much, Kevin. We really could talk for ages. You've given us so much to think about in terms of how we do really good carers assessments and follow through the principles of the Care Act duties to make sure everybody gets the best support that they need. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for joining this session. Please do check out our further resources and other videos on this and other themes on the Sky website. Thank you.